As expected, breaking news. President-elect Donald Trump will name Key Square Capital Management CEO Scott Bessent to be his Treasury Secretary. Bessent is the founder of Key Square Capital Management. He's a hedge fund manager who lead the Treasury Department. He has been really one of the finance world's most vocal supporters of President-elect Trump, and he has been an advisor, a key economic advisor to the President-elect and his team, talking about economic policies. He has suggested to the President to pursue a 3-3-3 policy, in other words, cutting the budget deficit to 3% of gross domestic product by 2028, spurring GDP growth by 3% through deregulation and producing an additional 3 million barrels of oil or its equivalent a day. He is seen as a key economic advisor, and now, after a long process, which took some time to find a Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, the hedge fund manager, is the pick for President-elect Donald Trump. Senior national correspondent Rich Edson is in West Palm Beach, Florida. Good evening again, Rich. This had long been thought that he was always in the mix. There were others, like Kevin Warsh, former Fed governor, who was said to be possibly a Treasury Secretary, but more likely now President-elect Trump's selection to take over the Federal Reserve when Jerome Powell leaves.
Right, and that was the Wall Street Journal's reporting that they would potentially think about putting, and that the president-elect had thought about perhaps floating the idea of putting Warsh at Treasury and then moving him over to the Federal Reserve in a few years from now. But right now, according to a transition official, the pick is Scott Bessent will be the nominee to lead up the Treasury Department. This is a major economic position, often running point for administrations, because at the Treasury Department, you're not only talking about just general economic policy, you're talking about tax policy. They run the IRS. You're talking about a whole list of regulatory issues that go through the Treasury Department. So this is a big pick and a big job. We have been hearing a number of different names for a couple of weeks now, and the president-elect, we had heard, wasn't happy with how some of the discussions were going, maybe Howard Lutnick going there, his transition co-chair. Instead, that pick went to the Commerce Department, and Bessent now going to Treasury, at least the nominee for the Treasury Department. Part of the hang-up, too, we had been hearing from sources was an issue of tariff policy. A number of economists have criticized the president-elect for the idea that he wants to put tariffs on a number of items coming into the United States, not just on wholly made items, but components that might be assembled here. Bessent has embraced that. In fact, what he has said is that the U.S. should embrace Alexander Hamilton's favorite tool, tariffs, he says, for 3 reasons. He said Hamilton liked it because it funds the U.S. Treasury. Secondly, it says it protects American industries. But he says there's a third reason, and then that's that the president-elect or then President Trump can use it as leverage in negotiations. So he's a supporter of that. The transition team sees that that's something that the president-elect and then president's going to want to work with here, someone who's embracing this type of economic policy. And so therefore he's got the nod, and this nomination will head up to the U.S. Senate, see if he can get it through. Back to you.
Yeah, he graduated from Yale in 1984, had a long career on Wall Street, obviously a hedge fund manager, very successful. He is gay. He's married to a former New York City prosecutor, John Freeman. They have 2 children, primarily lives in Charleston, South Carolina. Scott Bessent could be the first Senate-approved LGBTQ plus member in a Republican cabinet. Rick Grinnell became the first openly gay acting cabinet member when Trump tapped him as the acting director of national intelligence in 2020. But he has been advising the Trump campaign and the president-elect really for quite some time.
Yeah, he has. He's also donated $3 million to Trump and other Republican causes in the election cycle. He's called Trump a very sophisticated person on economic policy. And the other half of that, we talked an awful lot about tariff policy here and how important that is to the president-elect. He mentioned it an awful number of times. In fact, can't count the number of Trump speeches I've been to over the past couple of months where he said, I've got a new favorite word, and it's tariff. And he's tried to push that concept, not only, as we talked about leverage there, but as an economic policy, but as someone who knows Wall Street and who knows investing. And that's important too for a Treasury Secretary. It's not just the Fed chair that monitors markets, it's the Treasury as well. And the Treasury is so much more part of an administration than the Federal Reserve, which is very much an independent agency there. This really is a hand-in-glove relationship. The president needs to feel comfortable working with his Treasury Secretary on economic policy. You saw the first term around all the cabinet members that came through the Trump administration. One spot you had pretty good staying power there, and an ear he listened to an awful lot was the ear of Steve Mnuchin, who was right down Pennsylvania Avenue, the Treasury building and the campus right next to the White House, and was a trusted advisor for the bulk of that administration. So this is a pick that is very, very important for the president's economic policy. It's a huge component of what he's hoping to do in the White House, overhaul economic policy with a number of other policies as well. And knowing markets, knowing capital markets like that was also another huge selling point into this pick.
Yeah. And actually, the markets, just talking to a number of experts on Wall Street and around, there was this calming factor about Scott Bessent and Kevin Warsh, for that matter, about how the markets would react to this choice, a big choice for President-elect Trump. Again, his nominee for Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. Rich Edson in West Palm. Rich, thanks.